1. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of ArmTalk. I'm your host, Jody Williams, and today I got a very special guest, a very special treat. Look at that forearm. He is the 26-time world champion, Mr. Alan Fisher. Alan, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I just found out going through all my trophies and titles, I actually have 27 world titles.
27. So let me go.
Because
I'll fix
I
that.
found one when I moved out of San Diego and moved up here to Idaho. I went through all my stuff and pretty much gave it all to my friend Benji, right? And one of the trophies I found was an international title, actually a very nice trophy. So I never really counted that as a world title, but yeah, I'll take 27.
Hey, that'll work, So before we get into that, how is the move to Idaho now?
It went really, really. I'll tell you what. I know there's a lot of people that don't believe, but I do. God paved the way to Idaho for us. I mean, we were coming here during a snowstorm, and yeah, I'm telling you, we came up here and we were headed from California up here, and all the way it seemed like God just opened up the pathway for us. And our journey here was just astounding, considering that the weather was not good here. But when we got here, it was beautiful.
So we have Scott Evans from Utah is in the chat. Even this guy, Mr. Cobra Rose, he says, hashtag fish face.
My good friend Cobra. Man, do I miss him. Man, I'll tell you what.
Yeah. You guys had some battles over the years too. So
we have, and what's interesting about my career is that we would have had a lot more battles had I competed on Sunday in my earlier days, which I didn't believe in competing in sports due to the type of Christianity I was in. I even missed Dave Patton and I arm wrestled for over 15 years. So there was no doubt that if somebody went to a tournament and they knew that Dave was there and I was there, he was going to take first place or I was going to take it. For like 15 years. So, but I didn't get to arm wrestle in those huge tournaments where there was like serious money. I think Cobra could probably talk about the one that they had one on some island where they're giving some enormous amount of money. I never competed on Sunday. So I missed out a lot, but you know what? That's where the Lord led me.
Right. And I know nowadays the landscape of the sport has changed drastically, but if we can go back in time for a little bit, and the ABC Wild World of Sports, that was a big thing back then, and you were a big part of that. Can you tell everybody, all the viewers out there, what was that like, and what was your experience with it?
I have to tell you about my first experience. So,
okay,
let me see. I would say it was June or July of 1979. Most people know this. I cut my wrist from here to here, severing all tendons, top nerve of my thumb and both main arteries, and I was on the 4th story of a building. Probably should have died. Lord should have taken me out, but for some reason, even though I lost half my blood, he decided to preserve me, right? It was all part of his plan. So when I first went to Petaluma, California, I got invited by John Bergstrom, a guy named Bobby Ruffino, Ed Levitt. A lot of you old guys will know who some of these people are. Jack Wynn, I believe, was there. Yeah. We went up in the back of a pickup truck, and I had my hands are way too big. I had a glove on my hand. First time I went to Petaluma.
Right.
Because I was still like healing from that. But I decided to go and just to see what was happening. And it was really interesting. I guess I could say because of Jack Wynn, who stopped me going out of, I was going out of Magic Mountain. Mm-hmm. I had taken like 5th place in a national qualifying event, my very first tournament. And Jack Wynn, Jack Popeye Wynn, do you know him?
Yeah.
Yeah, he stopped me and said, "Hey, I heard you live in, I think I was in Arleta." He says, "You're not too far from me. Why don't you come and train with me?" And I said, "Sounds great." Well, this is a side story, man. I'll tell you what. But Jack, literally, like wrist wrestling is like this, right?
Right.
All he did was he crushed me. Jack did not show me things like I needed to learn, but I got strong from the get-go from that wrist wrestling style of coming inside with people. So I got to the point where I was holding Jack down here as he hit me, and then I was just over time I just get here. I told everybody in California, all you old guys who know who I am, I was going to beat Jack Wynn at the California State Championships, or WPAA, that was held at Busch Gardens. And it was at that point everybody laughed at me. I had a huge hand. I weighed 150 pounds, and I knew I was going to stand Jack up at that 4-count rule. And I still have pictures to this day of my arm just being massive at that age and that weight. And Jack never actually beat me in a competition ever. So I think I gained respect from the world of arm wrestling, which was pretty much California, right?
Right.
When I took out Jack. So my second time I went to Petaluma, California, 1980. I think I took, let me see, I had it up here on screen. I think I took second, but I'm not sure. No, I didn't. Steve Lusby and Jack Wynn. So Lusby won. You remember Steve Lusby?
I recognize the name, but I never actually met him in person.
So Steve Lusby was truly a legend in wrist wrestling. I don't know how many world titles that little squirt had. He was 150-pound farm boy is pretty much what he was. And he was very difficult to beat in a wrist wrestling. And plus, since most of those guys are gone, if the referees, I don't want to say, if the referees liked you, you had favor. At the same time, a lot of that, if anybody knows what I'm talking about, jamming, blocking, body position, facial position, neck position, all that stuff was allowed, right?
Right.
But you also couldn't win that tournament unless the referees held your arm down on that table. Like you didn't have your arm up. Lusby mastered it. I mean, you've got to see the video. You had to have seen those videos. If not, have fun there, Jody. Where, do you know who Dave DeVoe is, right?
Oh yeah.
So Steve Lusby is wrist wrestling somebody. I don't know who it was, and the guy had taken Steve Lusby's wrist, and Steve Lusby looks over at Dave DeVoe and says, "He's got my wrist." Guess what Dave did? He reached in, straightened out the twice, man. So, wrist wrestling is a whole different ball game when it comes to strategies. Mm-hmm. I'll say cheating, whatever. It's probably more like a strategy. It was all allowed back then. Right. But I don't know how many times I've pinned people where I wouldn't be called a winner unless my elbow was being held down by the referees.
Gotcha. And that was like the Wild West type deals when you had those donut elbow pads.
No, that's not a donut. That's okay. I was just telling the guys the other day, the Treasure Valley Pullers, we had the table, the wrist wrestling table was like, do you know what felt is?
Yeah.
A material. So picture felt and then Naugahyde or something like it covered over a wood table. That was the top of the table. Yeah, it was very painful. And then it was the same thing for a picture that, like an open square. Okay. And it was raised up about maybe a half inch or so that had felt around the wood. So that was our pad, which wasn't a pad. It was just a place to keep your arm. And man, dude, if you got pinned and you're anywhere near that wood, you walked away with a nice little bruise here or here. It was crazy times. Great time.
That just sounds painful,
It was very painful, but that's all there really was until who was it? Ron Bennett. If we're going to talk about wrist history, Ron Bennett and John Woolsey came up with a peg table design, which you see in what they call, Steve Simons pretty much put it on the market too, on the map, called the WPAA, the World Professional Arm Wrestling Association, and then John John Corbett from the Southern California Arm Wrestling Association. They were both very close to each other. They made the peg table world renowned.
Okay.
So the peg table you see today was something that was developed by Woolsey and Bennett. That was the one you're talking about, the donut pad, which I still have, by the way. And then Benji's got my original. Okay, so what was it? July 26, 1986, over the top. I was in welding class back then, and I wanted to take a table to the actual hotel and make sure that I was in the right frame of mind.
Right.
So I had my teacher, myself, we built an aluminum table, just like the WPA table, but it was made out of aluminum. And my good friend Benji has my original table that I took to that tournament.
Nice. Yeah, that's
cool.
right there. That's classic right there. That's classic.
Yeah. So sorry if I'm a little bit detailed about everything I say. It's probably out because my brain just won't shut off.
No, it's good to know that. I mean, a lot of us want to know the sport, and sometimes you got to talk to the right people to get the real juicy detail of it. And I haven't been there, but hearing you speak of it, I kind of picture myself going, man, it must have been just wild days back then, And so after those days, where did you go next?
Yeah, let me tell you about those wild days. Those wild days, you go to a tournament today, yeah, you have cheering and all that kind of stuff taking place and the clapping and, the hurrahs. But I'll tell you what, back in those days, if you were in the room, you wish you would have had earplugs. Dave Patton and I, we brought down the house. So did John Brzezinski.
Yes.
The great John Brzezinski. All these like top names back then. There was so much noise in the room. It was just crazy. And, don't forget, a lot of that came out from a place where there was an auditorium of people. I don't know how many it was, but in Petaluma, California, that place was packed. Sometimes you couldn't even get in, right? And
yes,
people were cheering for the characters. They were cheering for, you know what I mean by characters.
Yeah.
They were just there, just going nuts. Well, that still continued in the 80s. Pretty much. I remember what you call Bull Hurley, Rick Zumwalt.
Yes, from Over the Top. Yes.
Yep. So I pretty much it's trained with Rick and John. Sorry, Virgil Arcerero and that whole group out there. Gary Stain and Giant Rick used to show up at the tournaments. In fact, you probably see this, find this video on there too. Real People. It was a TV show. And Rick
I remember that.
You do remember that?
Skip Stevenson, Sarah Purcell, and those guys. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, we had an arm wrestling tournament there where Rick Zolmo was there, and talk about loudness. Rick was loud, and if there was anybody in that room, you knew it was Rick, because he would just at the top of his lungs on television rip his arm off. and Rick was like that. So you talk about that character. It was all very strong back then. People even dressed up in uniforms at Petaluma. Do you know that, right? My friend, a good friend, dressed up as Rambo, became pretty famous for that.
Okay.
Wasn't that great in arm wrestling, but he was okay. Yeah. So the transition was very interesting to see how it went. A lot of those world wrist wrestling champions, once they got into arm wrestling, and people were pulling back, right?
Right.
I think if I remember right, Ricky Vars, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, I think he developed that style of loading back pressure, just pulling straight back. They're in Petaluma, California. I think he was one of the first, is what I've been told. I wasn't there because it was before my time, but arm wrestling completely changed after that, or wrist wrestling when it got into arm wrestling.
Right.
And you had the WPA table, which was a wide table, right? Mm-hmm. And then you had, do you know who Larry Siegfried is?
I recognize the name.
So Larry Siegfried is the guy who developed the glove that was in Over the Top. That wasn't the first time it was used, right? Because that was 1986. The first time it was used was in Petaluma Wrist Wrestling Championships. And
Okay.
they did that because people were slipping out. They did use duct tape before that.
I heard about that, and that was
Oh,
just
yeah.
like crazy to use duct tape to make sure you didn't slip out.
Exactly. And so, but you know what happens with duct tape when you start to sweat?
Starts to slide and slip.
So Larry developed a glove that worked quite well, and unless you were very powerful, you could come out of the glove, right? And that's what happened. You see a lot of people coming out of that glove, but it still went on to be the only one in the world. By the way, no one's even thought of it before that.
So was the
Right?
glove leather? Was it leather material?
Yeah, it was leather material. Both put you put your fingers in it. The whole thing is wrapped around both your wrists. It was kind
Right.
of cool, but like I said, if you were somebody that had a lot of loading and back pressure and you're able to take people's wrists, you could come out. I think John probably has been in that thing a few times, right?
Wow. Yeah.
He's a guy with the power.
So I mean, like those days, and then you start morphing into like I was going to say, ABC Wild World Sports, and I'm watching some of the old clips, and I think Arm Sports Video, Scott McGinnis of Canada, has some of those clips in his library, and so I'd watch him. And I'm kind of going, man, and I know what you mean. It was like you guys were on the stage, and you can see the auditorium type seating, when the camera pointed the other way and stuff, and it was just you, and you guys were like going just. You were like this, and you're going like that. You guys were just jamming back and forth, and it's like seeing you and Dave Patton those days, even the Yukon Jack. But before we get to the Yukon Jack, so the Petaluma days, wrist wrestling, right? You had the Johnny Walkers and yourself, and the all kind of guys. Tell us what the Harvey Maynards, and the list goes on and stuff. So when you have those guys and Ray Rosenfans and John Woosley and all those guys, what was that like to sit there? I know they had weight classes, but were there like 3 weight classes or 4?
Oh, there was more than that.
Yeah.
Was there 4, 5, sometimes 6? It just depends on who put on the event. You had all these different sanctions that were not only in California, but even nationwide, Canada, the whole thing. Right. Yeah, there was all kinds of, and they all had different rules. Like I said, Larry Siegfried's table was it was a WPA table. In other words, it was a peg table. The donuts were a little bit more, they're not as tall. I think Larry didn't want to get sued, right? For making something. So, but see, Larry if you look at Larry, he competed in Petaluma a few times that I know of. And all that style was like, let me just turn this thing down. All that style was like this, right? And you're on a narrow table in Petaluma, California. You're not on a wide table. So Larry wanted to come up with his own table called the NAWA table, National Arm Wrestling Association table.
Okay.
And all the people he trained were inside people. Bob, somebody, I can't remember his last name, Bob. Well, anyway, I can't remember. But all the guys were inside pullers. Well, things began to not pan out for all of his champions, and he had his own champions, right? Because he trained them. Everybody was pulling to the outside. So no matter what, if you went inside and this guy's doing this, you're going to get stopped. So that didn't really last that long. Larry put on some world championships and had, wow, you're just mentioning some names like Maynard, John Renfro, Burt Whitfield. I mean, there's a whole list of names that showed up at my first world championships, which was in December of 1980 in Las Vegas. Do you remember Ernie Jeffries?
No, I don't.
Okay, so you can get this. Everybody go get this book. Ernie Jeffries wrote a book called Arm Wrestling, How to Become a Champion. Him and his brothers actually pushed that whole peg table idea also through their book. Great book to read. I used to read it before I went to every tournament, and I'm not a reader. I just I just look for information. But Ernie was the first guy, because if you would have known me back in 1979, I was my whole life was like messed up. I sit there and hold a beer in my hand, right, and arm wrestle in the competitions. at the bars.
I thought that was a
And
California thing.
yeah, the California thing. There you go. That's just what we're allowed to do. That they never said I couldn't. It's good advertising.
Yeah.
But Ernie saw me and said to me, well, he invited me to his house, and Ernie had a mouth on him. Ernie was a great guy, but he could certainly use the expletives. And he looked at me one day and he said, "You're effing crazy." He says, "You look at the size of your hand." Can you get it on the screen? He says,
Oh,
and I was 150 pounds. He says, if you get your together, right? He
right.
says, you have to be a world champion. I was in his home right next to a billiard table. I'll never forget it. And it was because of him that I, instead of just screwing around, right, playing with the sport, I became a professional athlete that night. And my
Okay.
whole mental condition, my adrenaline, my endorphins, they switched. And I stopped doing the things that I was doing as far as, drinking beer, arm wrestling stuff. I was
Mhm.
still living the life of sex and drugs and rock and roll. But as far as the sport was concerned, everything changed.
Good. And it changed for the good, because now look at you.
Yeah.
You've come a long way. Even one of your pupils, Paul Stevens, who's in the chat, um,
Paul's been
yeah,
training with me since he was 17 years old. He's never given up, and he's really come a long way. He's become a great coach. Uh, yeah, Paul's out there. Everybody knows who he is. He can give people a run for their money.
I know firsthand. That guy is something else, and he just keeps coming and coming. So yeah, he's a good guy to pull with. So if you guys, San Diego is where he's at. So guys, get a hold of Paul Stevens if you can. So
Awesome.
tell us how those tournaments, Yukon Jack, they were held in San Francisco and New York, and which one did you go to?
So again, going back to my early days, I didn't compete in certain things because, first of all, Yukon Jack is an alcohol, and
Right.
as a strong Christian, I had a problem wearing. In fact, I have a jacket in my closet for winning the world championships there, and what to this day it's got what do you call it, black marker on Yukon Jack.
Right.
So I always had a problem in the early days wearing anything that said Yukon Jack.
Right.
Right. So then when I think I had fallen away from the faith for a while, and I started to compete at Yukon Jack. So my first time I think I went and competed at Yukon Jack, and it had been a while. I showed up in San Francisco in 1993. Now,
Okay.
Dave and I had been arm wrestling quite a bit. I think the first time I met Dave was in December of 1980 at that first World Championships. He was my very first professional competitor at the
Ooh,
World
nice.
Championships. Yeah. And there was a rule back then, since you like history, there was a rule back then that if you pulled someone's elbow off the cup, they lost.
Really?
I shoved his elbow or pulled his elbow off that pad 7 times. Virtual Serrero wouldn't call it. And I said, screw this. I'm going to the loser's bracket. Because I didn't want to wear myself out, pulling against, it's like pulling against Dave. It's like, you can get worn out quite easy. The guy's a technician. He's super strong. Right. He's so focused. So Dave was my very first match. And I went to the losers bracket in that tournament and went through undefeated. And the guy I met at the final match was Jack Wynn. Jack Popeye Wynn. Can you believe that? That was my first world title. Anyway, what was your question?
No, it was just like, those battles you had at the Yukon Jack.
So
those were outside,
Jack, I showed up. I hadn't been pulling for a while. I don't know. I forget. I'd have to go back, but I took a short break, probably because I was just busy with life. I was probably working 18 hours a day back then. I think I was working quite a bit, and family and the whole thing. And I decided just to show up to the Yukon Jack World Championships. I probably had to qualify, I think.
Right.
San Francisco, 1993, and Dave Patton was there going to take that title again. So there's some private stories that other people will tell you. I won't put that here, but
Right.
Dave didn't even want to come to the table. He knew that I was a force to be reckoned with, and had a really tough time coming to that table. Kind of hit himself some more or less, but he had to come, and I
Right.
ended up beating everybody that showed up at that tournament. I was like, you talk about focus. My focus was off the charts. Cobra could tell you some of this stuff. I might think when I get in that frame of mind where that professional thing is like, I don't believe in any. This is a good tip for all you guys listening to this call. Is like, I don't believe in any form of negativity. I never have negativity. Dave Patton showed up. John Brzenk showed up. If, when, but. So none of that part is ever in my brain.
Okay.
I'm here to focus in on who God made me to be, a champion. And more or less like I'm competing against myself, if that makes sense. Like I'm
It does.
proving to myself that nobody else matters on the other side of the table. What have I trained for? What have I become? I've been made a champion. So I focus on that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm competing against John Brzenk, and I go with the same form of mind. Do I know I'm going to get beat by John Brzenk? Yes, but at that moment, no.
I like that.
Do everything that I can, regardless. So
yes, I love that.
That's what happened. Bobby Brown was in that tournament back then. He used to be in my weight class. Man, I could some of the names. Sometimes I need triggers, but yeah, I ended up beating Dave, taking the title. And then in 1984, since you're talking about Yukon Jack, Dave and I got in some battles. I mean, some serious battles.
I've seen footage of that.
Oh my goodness. A lot of people don't know it, but I hit Dave with such great side pressure in that event that he tore his pec.
Ooh.
Yeah, at the tournament. And Dave said that he took I don't know, was it 20, 30 Advils or one of those things?
Right.
And ended up coming back in the finals after I'd beaten him and ends up beating me.
With a torn pec.
With a torn pec. That tells you about Dave Patton, man. I'll tell you what, that guy is fierce. Fierce. But that was one of my best events.
When you tear your pec and you got to come back and pull you in the finals, and you got more intensity than I know, and to sit there and block out the pain and grind and still get the win with a torn pec tells you all you need to know about someone's determination and frame of mind. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because he had Alan Fisher on his brain. That's why.
Yeah,
right?
Because
Dave and I have been friends ever since we met, but at the same time, there's this somewhat animosity against me, since I'm one of the few guys in the world in his history that could actually take him out as much as I did. I think Dave's got definitely more wins than I ever have against him.
But that's what makes a good rivalry. And reason why I like bringing those matches up between you and Dave Patton, it seemed to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems to me back then it was about the competition, your opponent. If you win money, fine, cool. But it was like, I'm going to get you, and that was your determination. I'm training for this specific person. If you got Dave, on the East Coast, I'm training for Alan Fisher. You're here out West going, okay, I'm going to meet Dave Patton in the finals. That was you guys' mind frame. I don't care about anybody else. I will see you in the finals. End up. That's how it was. Was it not?
Again, for me, it wasn't about Dave Patton.
Okay.
God made me a champion. He gave me this body. I'm going to train the body, take care of the body, the one body he gave me, to the best that I can, so that when Dave shows up, it's not going to matter. Now, I have to tell you something that a lot of people won't like to hear, but Dave will remember this. All I wanted to do in the beginning when I met Dave was rip his freaking arm off. I wanted to hurt him. I wanted to, I guess I had a sort of like competitive anger against him, right? And I think I got a lot of that through Steve Lusby and others who I knew back then too. They said the same thing, and it got in my head. But then in mid 1982, God was pleased to rescue me from myself and grant me salvation through His Son Jesus. Right?
Right.
It's a long story. It should be in a book or a movie. But I remember sitting down with Dave at the Canadian American Championships in Reno, Nevada. Man, Jody, you would have loved that tournament. You would have loved it. It was one of the best tournaments. There was so much energy in that room. The greatest showed up, and it was every year. Bob Howell put that on. I remember inviting Dave to have dinner with me.
Okay.
And the Lord had saved me, so I was like, ignorance on fire, you could say. But I believe what the scripture said about salvation. And I sat down and I gave the gospel of God to Dave. Guess what happened? I started beating Dave because I no longer had that anger. I no longer had that I'm going to rip his arm off. I'm like, we're going to compete as competitors. And it was at that point that I started beating Dave on a consistent basis because all that anger was gone. And God gave me a sense of peace. And Dave will remember that. I'd love to have Dave say something about that night.
So, Alan, here's a question. Have you ever competed at a WAF World Championship before?
Yes. I hate to say this, but I've always boycotted WAF. Why?
Okay.
Because say 2,000 people show up, 3,000 people show up, and they're paying so much money. They got their room, their hotel, their travels, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Which is a lot of money. Could be a lot of money. Could be $3,000, $4,000, right? To go there to get the WF title. When you win, Jody, in your own words, describe the trophy.
For me, a medal that's validated.
Okay, validated. But is there any worth to it? Like, is it gold? Is it gold plated? Is it, there's definitely a validation, but I always had a problem, which is why I boycotted it, with somebody's making a lot of money and you get a trophy that you call a validated trophy.
Right.
Where's all that money?
True. That's true.
So that's why I've always boycotted. So the only 2 times that I've ever competed, I was 100% sponsored.
Okay.
Okay.
Makes sense.
The first one was in, I want to say Canada, 2008. You'd have to go back there and look. And WAF is a different style. Have you competed there?
No, not there yet. One of these days I will, but I've never competed there.
So everything you know at this point about WAF is just knowledge, no experience.
Right.
When you go to WF tournament, everything changes.
Really?
Everything. The rules, the referees. I call it favoritism. You know what I'm saying is
right.
I'm just being honest with you because I've seen it in the past 45 years. I've seen it, right? Or whenever they came on board. So I got fouled out, right? On that in 2008. I don't know what place I took. I don't even know where I was at. And then in 2010, I got invited again to, no way, that one was Mesquite, Nevada.
Yeah, right outside of Vegas. Okay.
And I wasn't, to be honest with you, and there's no excuses, I didn't win, but I wasn't in the right frame of mind. Sports is about mentality, focus, and like I'm constantly training. If you look on my desk, I have all kinds of things that I train with. I've moved most of them. I got a little giant paper clip I use. With my autism, my OCD, I'll sit here and play with this pen back and forth. That's constant training, right? Everything
you mean
I do
like this,
there you go.
Pony clip. Yes, kids, I use this. See that? So yeah.
Try the heavy duty paper clip. That thing's a lot of fun. But everything that I do, and anybody that knows me, I pronate, I supinate, I load, I do finger pressure, I do flexing and extending, I do wristing on my steering wheel of my car.
Really?
So I don't drive like a normal person. Hang on a second, just 1 second.
This is some good stuff. Aha.
Okay, since I've been around a long time, and I constantly train my mentality. I'm doing this all the time, right? With the 60-pound gripper.
Yeah.
See this thing? Can you see it?
Oh yeah, that big band.
Well, I'm going to make Rogue a lot of money. I put this on my steering wheel, and I do loading. I do back pressure. I do supination. I do everything on my steering wheel as I'm driving.
Wow.
So I never stop training mentally. So what I'm telling you is in 2010, I wasn't like that. I mean, I think I was just super busy, had my own my own door and window business or something. I don't know, something was going on where I was not mentally training. So I more went there. I went there as a quote a celebrity. Everyone wanted to see me and all that stuff, and you know,
Right.
you're the poster boy. Come on out and meet all the people from around the world. But I wasn't in the mood to be the person that I was. I had a great time. Great time. If I would have trained with it, there's no doubt I would have probably taken second to Giannis Amelins. Right?
See, there you go. Paul Stevens
maybe
asked a
first,
question.
Maybe first, I don't know. I just didn't really train for it. Giannis is, by the way, Giannis, in my opinion, is Dave Patton today. He's technical. He's very strong. He's mentally, he's there. He doesn't let a lot get to him. He doesn't like. You'll see him get upset. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes that can even override your performance. You know the conditions that you're in.
Right.
And you could, when I arm wrestled Dave had that. He didn't have that calmness about him. Whereas Giannis, you've seen some of the battles he's been in. He's very calm.
His facial remarks doesn't change a lot.
No. And neither does his strength.
So we do have a question. Paul Stevens says, Jody, ask Alan when he trained with the dinosaurs. Laugh out loud.
You must be talking about Virgil Arcerero, Bruce Way.
Legends of the sport.
Yeah, legends of the sport. Man, oh man, some of those guys, all those guys that came to the workout that I first went to, I think it was John Corbett's house. Virgil had some beast there. Virgil, he trained like a mad dog, which is why I think he had so many problems with his cartilage. You know, he lost all his cartilage. I don't know if you knew that or not.
No,
on
I
both
didn't.
arms. Yeah, they were all there. Gary Stain, definitely a force to be reckoned with back then. Man, that guy trained like a mad dog. He was so focused. I think didn't he take second place and over the top?
I believe so. So.
Yeah,
So you were there, right?
Yep. Dave Patton.
Talk about a crazy tournament. You were there. I mean, I hear all the stories about how it lasted until the early morning of the next day and stuff like that. And
21-hour tournament.
What was that like? Can you imagine? People complain about tournaments being, 7 hours now. Can you imagine how that tournament was? Where, I heard Richard Lepke's tell a story. I've heard, tons of people tell their version of the story and stuff. And I would like to hear your version of, what was that like with all these athletes and, people falling asleep and then having to wake up. Oh, they called my name and I got to get to the table and all that kind of stuff. I'd love to hear your side of the story with that.
Oh man, I'll tell you what, I was so focused that nothing mattered to me. I didn't care about meeting Stallone or Bridget or, the cameras. And I was so focused. Lori Cole told me, and you may have heard this, that there were over 125 people in my weight division.
Wow.
You want to hear something really strange, Jody? I only remember one of them. And
Really?
I went through everyone. It was 6 o'clock the next morning. I had beaten this guy who had taken out all the champions with a press like this, right? He was just a freak of nature. Like, who the heck is Tony Golden from Canada? I don't know who this guy is, but I'm going to go through him like he went through everybody else. So I bet here's the other thing. It's 21 hours, right? So
Right.
everybody tells me I couldn't sleep, I couldn't rest. I was like a lion in that room. I was walking around everywhere. I do remember that because even my wife said to me, "You need to get some rest." I'm like, I don't need no rest. I just need to stay focused. So 6 o'clock the next morning, you probably see this in my Facebook wall. I went through Tony Golden in the final match. So much energy, power, endorphins, everything kicking in that I smashed him immediately to the point where somehow I wound up on the table after I beat him.
Really? Wow.
I don't even, I just don't remember. I don't remember. Somebody sent me the picture from the audience. So
Nice.
I was just, nothing. I met everybody, and I'm as friendly as they come. But when I'm focused, I don't even know who you are after the tournament.
Hey, that's the life of a referee. When you ask him who won, I don't know. I was just ref for the match, that kind of thing. But when you have 125 guys in your class, how do you stay, focused for that long? Because if you pull one match, who knows when the next time your match is being called? I mean, I get anxiety because when I go to a tournament, it might be 8 guys. All of a sudden, I get nervous. I got to use the bathroom. Well, I better hold it because if I leave to go to the bathroom, my name will be called, and I don't want to get, put out because I wasn't there. So do you remember how much time it was between your matches?
No idea. I just know that nothing mattered but what I'd become, and I was gonna. Most people would say they prove it to the world, but I live before God, so I don't like. I might have 27 world titles, but I don't have one trophy with me anymore. All my trophies actually, when they came out and did a TV show, you can actually see this somewhere on the internet too. They come out and did a TV show. They asked me to get my trophies out. Well, my trophies have been in the cubby hole for 20 years in boxes. So I'm not the kind of guy to display trophies. What I say is I'm just flesh and blood like everybody else, right? And the Bible says that godly exercise profits little, right? You think about it. Let's see if I become like 200 pounds, like some of these guys used to be in my class, right? And I'm winning the title. But then something happens to me. I get cancer. I get hurt. I rip whatever, right? I'm just flesh. I'm just flesh and blood, right? So the Bible says to give glory to God in all things, right? All things. Because who the heck are you? Like I'm halfway to 70 years old. And the Lord can take me like now. And those 27 titles, what did they mean? Right?
Right.
So it's not really my focus. That's why I got rid of all that stuff and gave it to Benji. Benji's gonna like to hear this.
No, it's just awesome to, chat with somebody who's been through those battles on the table, and then, just in life, how you turn your life around and stuff. And you found this and the intensity, and everyone talks when they say Alan Fisher, the two things that always comes up is the size of your hand and the intensity, and that's something you can't teach. You either have it or you don't, Is that
you're
true
right.
to say?
Like, you have to look at me, Jody. Look in the camera. Blink your eyes as fast as you can. Don't stop. Okay, so God gave you what they call you're good. Stop. You have fast twitch muscles, right?
Yes.
God gave you fast twitch muscles. I obviously have fast twitch muscles. Some people are born with that, and others are born with slow twitch. It's those slow twitch muscle people that have to train for strength and power and endurance. Guys like you and me, we go off of speed, cadence, the movements that we've learned.
Yes.
And that's where we focus ourselves. Like I may have gone through 125 people, but I guarantee you I didn't play with any of them. I'm not there to say, how strong are you? What did you learn? Right.
Right.
I'm gonna show you what you've trained for. Nothing. Right? I'm not like that guy. I'm just like, when they say I'm gone, you're down before, right?
Yeah.
Go.
That's, and I'm glad you brought that out, because it's like when I go to these tournaments, I'm not going to be the strongest, right? I don't have the biggest hand, that kind of thing. But sometimes you got to go what you've been blessed with. For me, it just happens to be the speed. So, I'm just blessed with it. I just got to make that my number one thing and just go ahead and do what I can and be good at it, So
the beautiful thing is for you, Jody, you have endurance, you have power, you've got the strength, you got the technicality. So you're bringing in this all together in one package,
right?
So you can have speed and still lose. I've seen it.
I've done it. Oh yeah. Just trying to outsmart the other person. Like, it's do I zig when he zags? It's a lot of stuff that comes into play because there's so much that goes on the table, especially like the setup. I mean, some people say you win and lose the match on the setup.
That's definitely true, but that's where you're letting people get into your head.
Right.
You're letting the referees. You're not controlling the referees. Right. You're not controlling your own movement. You're allowing your opponent to do that to you. If you lose in a setup, it's because, well, mostly you may have not have trained to be so strong. It doesn't matter. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. When we were in the AMC's game of arms.
Yes.
I was training quite a bit back then, 2013, 2014. And they had what they call, I'll call it character referees.
Yes.
Okay. For all you guys that were professionals, I apologize. But there were guys there that were there for the show. So my very first match against, I believe it was Burt Whitfield, back there in Pennsylvania, freezing cold building, open windows, the whole thing, and it's snowing outside. And I'll tell you what, I had no advantages. I had to arm wrestle Burt Whitfield, who's way out of my class in the first place, but he ends up pinning me with his elbow off the pad like by 4 or 5 inches. And they give him the win. So it was because of that I said what I just said. I lost because I wasn't so powerful right there that even if I had character referees, being so strong where somebody hits you and you're able to just stop them, that's one of the problems, is that you didn't train hard enough to even just take a 200-pound hit, right? Or 150-pound hit, whatever you want to say.
Right.
But I think mainly over the years, I've learned that, because I've trained people throughout the North America, Europe, all these different places. And what I find is that people allow certain positions from their opponents where they don't have utter control.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example. I don't know if you can see my wrist.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, so watch. You see this hole right here?
Yeah.
If you have that hole in a setup, you're vulnerable. So you have anything straight there that you could put up against your wrist and your arm?
I can use my...
You have a book or something? Anything.
Here, I got this package. I got this package right here.
No, it's got to be flat. It's got to be flat for what I want to show you. You have a ruler, a book.
I got a plate.
But it's not, a plate isn't flat.
Let
me see if I can do it. I'll grab my phone.
Okay.
Okay. See. Watch. Yeah, get your phone. You do it so I can see you. So get up in a setup and lower your phone. Move away from the camera a little bit so everybody can see what you're doing. Right there. You see that little gap right there?
Yeah.
You lost. You go against me, and I see that little dimple, you got a
Yeah.
problem, right?
Right.
One of the first things I'm going to look at is that dimple there? Is that little gap there? Now put that phone back up there again. Straight, no, lower it, move away from the camera. Straighten your wrist. That means move. No. Put your camera down, right there. Now, make your wrist go like this. Watch, like that, so that there's no space between. That's too much. So you can't overdo it because look, you see how the phone move away a little bit?
Right.
See how the phone below your wrist is on an angle?
Yeah.
And you still got a gap? So move it in until you don't see a gap. Go ahead. Right there. Look at you got the total advantage here, and your wrist is 100% straight. You see that?
Got it.
So little things like that are super important before go. I teach all the guys that I've trained. You can ask Paul, anybody. Make sure there's no gap.
Right.
And if you allow the referees to straighten your wrist and you're like that, you're giving power to the referees because your wrist is straight. Do you agree?
I agree. Yeah. Just, yes.
Yeah, it's straight. So you can't let the referees get in your head.
Got it.
Another thing, when you're set up on a table, your shoulders are to be perpendicular, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or parallel with your opponent. Back in the days of when we had the WPA table and other tables, at the center of the donut pad was a strip of laminate. Your shoulders could not go past center of the table of the donut and or the pad. Where are those rules today?
There's so many rules now. It's yeah.
Our sport is just getting so screwed up. So you know how you got the referees. I know you want to talk about history, but you're triggering my brain with a lot of things. When you set up and you're like this, right? Like the shoulders out past that one.
Right.
What's the referee doing to you? He's pounding on your shoulder, right? Tapping your shoulder, getting in your brain, right? So you train far before that tournament begins so that doesn't happen. So important.
Square. Yeah.
Yeah. I wish they'd go back to those lines on the table or make the rule where it says the shoulders can't go past, because all that stuff, it all started with wrist wrestling. Remember how you could use your chest, you could use your neck, you could use your face, whatever, and you're way past center. I mean, man,
I have people like leaning on their fists, resting, and then trying to, and then do that.
Yes.
And now it's like the referee is,
Oh yeah. So let me tell you an early part of my history. So I've always been strong right in the center of the table, right?
Right.
But I'd had guys like Terry Busk, who you wouldn't know, but Terry Busk was very powerful with his inside move. And the rules back then says you couldn't touch your shoulder, right? Your shoulder couldn't touch your opponent. So I thought, okay, that's a rule. So why don't I just arm wrestle like this then? Why don't I just let him pull and then I'll just point to his shoulder? So he has to get off of it. I don't see anybody do that today. Why? You can do it.
Right.
I can open my hand if I can hold it and just push on his shoulder. It's just some tricks.
So much have changed in the sport, and since you've been around and you've seen the evolution of this sport, change time and time again. Do you think our sport now is changing for the good by any chance?
Ooh.
And that might be a loaded question too.
You throw me under the bus here, buddy? What?
Well, I mean, it's just to the point where you see it, and like I've always wanted to know some of the guys that we all looked up to that y'all paved the way for us, and now you see the sport where it is now, and it makes you wonder, kind of like, that's not arm wrestling. I mean, I've heard Cobra before. Him and I have talked before, and he's just like, hey, just get in there and bang, and just what is this stuff doing now? And so I'm just kind of curious, from your point of view. Do you think the sport has changed for the good By chance, like I said, I didn't mean to put you on the spot if I did, but
Okay, so I like the '80s style of arm wrestling, right?
mhm,
So everybody, you have to agree with this, worldwide. Everybody wants to see each other pull,
right.
right? Have battles. The sport has gone to a place where the referees are controlling everything for the most part. And talk about the WAF. Oh my goodness. Did you watch the event? I forget what year it was where they had this thing called micro fouls.
Yeah, that's
I mean, come
yeah,
on, guys. I mean, we don't. You come to a tournament that I'm going to put on, which I don't put on tournaments. My wife did.
right.
All those things are changing. There's first of all, I love you, Devin, and my good friend Crazy George, and others, but I'm against the whole idea of the King's move.
Hmm.
I don't agree with it at all. We want battles, and not everybody has bone locks. Not
Right.
everybody's arm can't be locked. And to teach younger people the King's move, I don't know. You know, Devin, I love you, Devin. Devin, and I believe it was Travis Bajan, said one time in an interview, and since you watch all the interviews, you might even know what I'm talking about. They said back then that the only people who should be doing the King's move are the elite arm wrestlers.
Yeah, I remember that. You
I
know,
agree with that. I don't, first of all, I don't think it should be part of our sport at all. I'm sorry, but I don't.
right.
Um, we need to get rid of the whole idea, since you're talking about where our sport has gone, the idea that we have to, in the WEF, I'll use that because of using or whatever. You battle through some of the best, even in super matches like not KOTT
Yeah.
uh, and East versus West. You've got cameras. You've got all these referees. You've got, like, you won, but no, you didn't, because we have to watch the video and see if there was daylight underneath your elbow.
Right.
I mean, come on. That's not our sport. That's not what the sport was. I don't know who developed this stuff. It's just so ridiculous. And then, if I can say this because you like history,
Yes.
you watched the earlier videos of the ESPN, of Yukon Jack, of some of those amazing events that they put on. AWI, so Arm Wrestling International, where they started out that hook thing. Back in those days, the referees had to hold you guys, right? And when
Yeah.
it was good that you were saying, they let go.
Yeah. To sit there and then, then it's got the way, let them pull,
But we were already in the match 100%. No, I mean, man, you asked Dave Patton this, because Dave was a master at that. He really was. He knew exactly when to hit, even in a full load, right?
Hmm.
So you had to be ready for that. So yeah, our sport has changed quite a bit. I mean, it's unbelievable stuff. I think the elbow manipulation, even the manipulation itself of, and you know this, manipulation, I don't think should be part of our sport, because it doesn't seem fair. Do you know what I mean by manipulation?
Yeah. It was cheating, right? I always
I'm
thought,
glad I didn't say it.
and this is no, you don't have to say it. I'll say it. I'm saying it. And this is where some people like me or hate me because I just tell what's on my mind. I don't back down. So my theory, and this is just my theory. I'm not saying people have to agree with me. I always thought if someone has to cheat, then that tells me that you don't believe in your own abilities. That's just me.
That's
Now, I'm
interesting.
not saying I'm right, but that's
Yeah.
just, like if you believe in your abilities,
Mm-hmm.
what's been given to you, you don't have to sit there and try to take advantage or cheat. That's just me. But like I said,
Okay, let's go with that. Since you're triggering my brain, Dave Patton never had to cheat in his life. Never. but he was the greatest cheater in our sport. Not manipulator, right?
Right.
He knew how to manipulate every point of the strap, of the fingers, of the referees, but he never had to do it ever.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just not like that.
Right. Well, you know how people in the setup, they want to sit there and try to do all that kind of stuff. I don't want to burn my energy on the setup. And I know nowadays it's a thing where your opponent wants to burn you out to where you just say, okay, just I'll go ahead and I'll cave into what you want to do. I just want to get the match going. And now you're at a disadvantage. I'm just like, look, my thing is that I didn't travel across country or to a different country to sit there and sit there and finger fight and all that stuff. I want to compete. I want to pull. You came to do the same thing. Let's go ahead and have it out instead of doing all this, straighten your shoulders. Okay, I'm gonna straighten my shoulders, but I'm gonna bow my wrist. Okay, straighten your wrist. Okay, but then I'm gonna do this again. Like, stop with the games. We came to pull. Let's pull. End of.
So what are the things that took away a lot of this stuff? I think, in my own opinion, one of the best run, I'm not sure, I'm not good at English, events ever to take place in the history of arm wrestling is the WPAA, World Professional Arm Wrestling Association. Why do I say that? First of all, I'm a speedster. I'm out playing games. I loved the WPA style because when they said ready, go, on that first go, you could bend your wrist and you couldn't move until the second go. Right. That's what I was told in the beginning. So there's a 2 count rule. There's a space in between. I love that, even though it's a disadvantage for me because I'm so fast. Right. But I like that. And it stops all that crap that you're talking about. I didn't know in the beginning that in the first go, you could actually pin the guy if you don't move your body. So the second year I went to the WPA, that's what I did. They say, ready, go. And I went, ready, go. And I go, I take down people like that. But the beautiful thing about the WPA is the setup. It was the fairest setup that I've ever been in. That whole thing about, okay, I would love to hear someone else say something about this. Maybe our friend over there, Eric Rusin, who has an incredible website, the Arm Wrestling Archives. I would love
check it out, people. Awesome website.
Got to check that out. I love it. I mean, this guy, it ought to be a book, but then again, do books exist today for our sport? I would love someone to tell me why. I know the reason.
Right there.
That's it.
Check it out, you guys. Arm Wrestling Archives, Eric Rasen. So check it out. It's on my phone. I always check out the stuff. So
this guy has spent so much time researching all this stuff. So Eric, I put this out to you. Tell me why we can't cap the knuckle, right? In the beginning, there was no rule about capping. There was a rule, though, that said you couldn't get on this part of the hand, right? That finger couldn't get here on your opponent. Okay. I personally believe I get punished having giant hands at 150 pounds.
Right.
And I could be wrong, but I think that whole thing started because of people like me that had giant hands. Why in the world can't we cap our knuckle? The rules said you could not, you get a foul if you get up here back in those days.
Right.
But we could cover our knuckle. And you're punishing a guy like me that has big hands. I mean, I know this better than anybody else pulling against Dave Patton, who has a very weird thumb, by the way, a long thumb, that goes between his knuckle. John Brzink's another one. I mean, come on. Why are you punishing? God made you a certain way. I had big hands, big thumb, thick hands, whatever. Why am I being punished against Steve Lusby? I'll use him. You don't know Steve, but Steve had a small hand, right? Oh, I'll give you another one that you should know. John Bullinato.
Yeah. The presser himself. Yeah. Every time I saw him, he was always like that.
John was one of my training partners. We traveled all across the United States together, competing and winning lots of money and doing drugs. But John had a small, skinny hand, just like our friend Dave. You wouldn't know this guy, David James. David James could sit right now without even training, do 1,000 fingertip push-ups. Little itty bitty skinny hands.
Right.
Right? Why are they punishing people with big hands? Why are they punishing anybody that it's not, if I just close my hand, I get punished. I mean, Dave Patton and I pulled so many times where I gave it up. I had to give it up.
Right.
Where Dave was manipulating, I'm like, oh, brother, okay? I had to give it up where it doesn't matter. I just got to get stronger. I just got to have better control. And then they changed the whole sport by this whole thing about capping the knuckle. Who developed that?
Good question. Here's a question. So with somebody with a large hand like yourself, wouldn't you just want to take just a lower grip and just control this area right here?
Only if you have the lat power to do that.
Right.
If you look at the people who actually pull like that, they use a lot of lat dragging, right? So tricep to the lat to give them the
Right.
power. If you don't have that kind of power, unless you're locking, like, where's this stupid thing? Unless you're locking, like, if you can lock like this and not move,
right? Yeah.
Yeah, you got to have a tremendous amount of power to do that. And there have been some. I mean, look at I'm trying to think of the guy back there in Canada. He was another guy like John Buonato who could just do that tricep press, but he had the power to do this too. A lot of great arm wrestlers had that power, but a lot of guys, Jody, as you're aware, they don't train it.
Right.
So that low hand, what they call the low hand top roll control, it's not a top roll, by the way. People stop calling that. Don Underwood, you need to educate people about what a low hand top roll is. You came up with a top roll out of Kansas, and they're calling this a low hand top roll, and it's like, what?
So is it because they and I don't want to say dump your wrist per se, but it's you kind of slide your elbow forward, but then you kind of get that. It's I can't do it because when I try to do that, it would hurt my wrist because I wasn't doing it right. So I quit doing it.
Oh, I don't know about that. It's not that you're not doing it right. There takes some fine-tuned training.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's where you learn everything. When I train people, and everybody's aware of this, I let people train slowly. There's no hitting, none of that getting in there like I'm the best. If you're going to come train with me, you're going to train hand to hand. You're going to learn feelings.
Yeah.
I know it's hard for guys, but you need to be able to know what's happening with every area of your body. Your pinky, right? Ring finger, middle finger, that. Just that little part I showed you about your wrist.
Yes.
All that.
Well, you used to have a what was it called down in San Diego, and you and your wife ran like a camp or I can't remember what it was.
Arm wrestling training camps. We're the first ones actually put on a arm wrestling training camp. We had as many. I think we had like 52 people was the people we had at one of our camps. First one I think was 48. It was wonderful, and I hired an exercise physiologist, a guy that trained the Cowboys, the Raiders. You wouldn't even know who she is, but she was a Olympic champion in gymnastics. I hired him to come down and talk about nutrition and the physiology of exercise. Right. And I never forget this. You know who Eric Wolf is?
Oh, yeah.
Eric Wolf is on the front of his chair. Most people are on the front of their chairs because they just like, wow, this guy talk about things that we just are not aware of. And I think that's what makes Todd Zilla so great.
Mm-hmm.
He understands exercise physiology, the workings of the body, right? The physiology of the body, the mental part of it, the need to actually focus in mentally all the time, right?
Right.
He's always working at something that works for his body. It's not going to work for everybody. I mean, you tell me anybody other than Devin, I don't know of anybody that trains like that kind of mentality where you're just like, for instance, let's just say you can quote side pressure. We'll get into that a little later. Side
Right.
pressure, 100 pounds, right?
Yeah.
If it's true side pressure, no tricep pressure, no pectoral, just more subscapularis, brachialis type stuff, and you're doing 100 pounds, well, you got guys like Todd that says 100 pounds ain't going to cut it. I'm going to 120, right? He is pushing his body beyond human limits in a sense, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people, they can't do that. They don't have time. They don't have that mentality. They don't. Do you write things down, Jody? Do you keep the log of everything?
I used to, and then I kind of just after a while I kind of quit because once, depending on what lift I was doing, when I start to hurt, then I just stop because you're never going to be 100% if you're always hurt.
Let's talk about that. Can I?
Okay.
Okay. So anybody that knows me in my training, because forget the year, 2014, 15, or something like that. I had severe medial epicondylitis. Do you know what that is?
I've never heard that word before, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So
Right.
tennis elbow type thing. So if you had a 12-year-old daughter, you could have beat me in 2000. I don't know if it was 14 or 15. I can't remember what it was. But I could not inward rotate at all. A 12-year-old would beat me they knew I had that. So what I did was, talking about pain, I listened to my body. Right? And I changed the angle, the design, the position, the degree, the amount of weight, the amount of tension, but I can still train. So 2014 or 15, whatever, I went undefeated pretty much all year round with severe medial epicondylitis. How did I do that? I listened to my body. The only one to beat me that year, I think, was Giannis.
Right.
At the what was that? WAL tournament.
Yeah.
In the finals, the World Championships, and I had what do you call it? Adrenal exhaustion from, I don't even know why, but there was no way I was going to beat him in the finals, but I beat everybody else. But
right.
Had Giannis known I did that, he could have just smashed. He didn't know my injury. I knew my injury. So what I did is, instead of inward rotating, right, which causes that problem, I changed the design, and all year round, I would just stay outside of anything that would cause pain. So don't control your pain, control your position so you can continue to train. Paul knows this better than anybody.
Right.
And even most of these guys are on this call, if they've trained with me and they've said they had certain problems, I'm able to get around their problems and still let them be able to use their bodies. Just don't ever bring attention to any pain.
Right.
That's the problem. People bring attention to it, and you're not going to heal.
Gotcha. No, that makes perfectly sense. Like, there's been times in the past where I've had wrist, it could be tendonitis, arthritis, whatever. For some reason, pronating hurts, right? So now, for some reason, when I do this, the pain goes away, and I can't explain it, but I do this, and I don't have the pain as a point when I do that. It flares up doing this way, or when I go ahead and try to supinate, I don't feel that pain.
Another thing, don't ever reveal to those who you train with, like your competitors, of any problems you have. Guys like me, we listen. We listen to everything.
Paul's listening now.
Okay. My good friend, Don Underwood.
Yes.
Here's a great story for you. Okay.
Oh, I think I know where you're going with this one.
So I'm training for, the game of arms. And during that time, it was very, very an exciting time. 2013 to 14, Robert Drink was involved. Remember that?
Was that the one where it's in Bakersfield? You ended up pulling him? Is that one?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you that story that most people don't even know. So Robert Drink, you remember him?
Yes.
So the UAL, Robert did great things for our sport. Tremendous promoter. Really knew how to get it off the thing. So he was just getting the UAL like really promoted, excited.
Right.
The people from the Deadliest Catch, Ethan Prochnick, Matt Renner,
Yes.
and trying to think who the other guy is. Short little guy. I'll think of his name in a minute. Anyway, Hollywood wanted a arm wrestling show. All of Hollywood, all the networks, right? They wanted to put something on television. So everybody was trying to get something to work. The Deadliest Catch people, those people I just mentioned, dang, I can't remember the other guys. Anyway, Alani.
Yes.
His name was Alani. And then the other guy, that is a videographer. They were all there at what they call the Ryan Sheets Memorial event, which was a great event.
Bakersfield, yes.
WPA table or the peg table, old school arm wrestling. So none of that elbow garbage stuff. There's no manipulation. Where this is true arm wrestling, right?
Right.
So I showed up at the tournament. I always show up before. I always like to get accumulated to the surroundings.
Yes.
The atmosphere, acclimated. Don Underwood, number 6 super heavyweight in the world, shows up, and he's gonna take that money. He's gonna take that title, the whole thing. And when the people from the Deadliest Catch showed up, the executive producers, they had Don and I go over in a bar. Sorry if I'm keeping you too long.
No, that's all right.
They had Don and I go over to a bar, and I'm not a shit talker. Anybody knows me. I don't care about that stuff because that's not what it's about anyway. But Don, Don's the opposite of that, right?
Don's being Don. Yeah.
So this is why I'm talking about this. Don is revealing who he is to me the day before the competition. So Don's sitting there doing his like who he is and what he's about and things he's done, and I'm just smiling. It's like, okay. That night, I got in his head. And
really?
Don knew it. Don absolutely knew. And not that I was shit talking, but I'm not like him.
Right.
I'm more or less laughing at some things he's saying, right? Because in competition, I'm a different person than I am meeting me in a bar.
Mm-hmm.
Jekyll and Hyde. I don't know what you want to call it. Anyway, so the next day, Don and I at the Ryan Sheets Memorial event have to go through all these people. This room is packed. There's probably 400 people in this room. Good arm wrestlers show up. In order to win, you got to get to the finals and win it, and then you have what they call the overall. We know what that is, right?
There's a video. I'm gonna put the link in here while you're talking. Go ahead. There's a video about this.
So Don wins his class easily. I win my class easily. And then in the overalls, here these people are, these executive producers and videographers. They're all filming this, what they called it the Samson and Goliath event. Yes. And I ended up beating Don. And that led to them taking that video to the networks in Hollywood, and they produce this incredible #1 unscripted show in AMC's history called The Game of Arms.
Right.
Did you know this? So in Hollywood, which is where all those people are, they invite Carol and I to come down to the event with the premiere event, right? The very first episode.
Right.
And I'm sitting there in this place in Hollywood where it's like a sports bar, and all these people that have put all this ton of money, the executive producers, blah, 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 into the show, they're not even watching the screen. All of them are on their phones watching to see how many people are commenting and watching. And So did you know this, Jody? The very first episode, there were over 1 million people watching the show.
I just put the link in the description, everybody, in the chat, in the comment section. I put a link of what you're talking about, that Bakersfield Ryan Sheets Memorial Tournament. So it's about 20 minutes long. I just posted it in there. So if you guys want to take a look, by all means, go ahead and do so. 1 million people.
Here's another thing that you could look up in YouTube, all you guys. Look up in YouTube, the beginning of the game of arms. That was a video that was taken from some footage where it was only the match I had with Don. Have you seen that one?
I don't think so.
Yeah, the beginning of the game of arms. I figured people needed to see part of the history of why it started.
Yeah.
So you got some good information. Okay, Eric Rusin, start writing. That was such a great event. I tell you, that was like I won't say it was like Petaluma, but it was a very exciting event to go to. The Sheets brothers.
What happened to that event?
Well, from what I understand, there was a fight with one of the referees. There's a lawsuit that took place, and after that, they just pulled out. I won't mention any of the names because you know who you are.
Yeah. That's unfortunate because good tournaments like that, like the new crop of pullers now, like they don't understand how good like the Yukon Jack was, or what's the one with the Harley pull? I mean, things like that. Yeah. What was the one at the casino in Connecticut?
That was the that was PAC, Professional Arm Wrestling Conference.
Yes, it was that one.
John
Mohegan Sun.
John Bergerson did a great job. I'll tell you, I think John was one of the best promoters also out there. He really made things happen, and he wasn't like everybody else either. Like Steve Simons, from the WPA had some clout, right? And he was a wonderful at promoting our sport. But you got to give it to John Bergerson, as small as he was, to make something like that happen. That was incredible. ESPN to get involved. Did you know this? This is kind of a fun part of history. So do you know who Roman Cindelari is?
Yes, I do. Yeah, that guy would come over to the station, just decimate people. Yeah.
Decimate. So there was a track record where he beat me, I beat him at the World Championship. So 1 year, next year.
Yes.
And then ESPN, they were excited about the trilogy that was about to take place for the third year. But if I understand this correctly, and John, you can correct me, but apparently ESPN wanted so much money to produce the third year that whole PAC thing came to an end.
Oh man,
it's really sad because the what do you call him, prime minister or whatever is the leader of Russia.
Yeah.
At that time, he knew me personally.
Oh, okay.
Do you know why?
Why is that?
I took out his champion.
We never got to saw the rubber match. That would have been nice to see because, he had a win on you, you had a win on him, and everyone's like, okay, we need to see, the tiebreaker, and we never got a chance to see that.
Yeah, me either.
But it's just good that I can sit there and have a guest like yourself on here so we can kind of school us, about, hey, things were different back then. This is how the rules were then. And it's awesome to have that. And now, I consider you one of the, handful of ambassadors of the sport, that can sit there and every now and then, like you and I chatted at the WSA finals last year in San Diego. And, you're kind of giving out advice here and there. You're kind of watching like this, and when it's not your turn to pull, you're kind of back here. And I remember you and I had got on the table and you went like this, and on the side table during the tournament, you kind of gave me that, and I gripped up with you. I was like going, yep, this is not going to end well. It's just the girth of your hand thinking, okay. And you gave me this look like, is that all you're doing? And I was kind of going, yeah, I'm a little, banged up, but it's always good that in the middle of a tournament and everyone's screaming and hollering, and you make that eye contact, you can, let's get on this table, that's the kind of stuff I enjoy. That's the kind of stuff I like. And I wish it could continue and stuff like that,
I love giving back to the things that I've learned from people over the years. Mm-hmm. And because of my autism, I'm constantly in a learning mode. I'm trying to think who this was. There was I think it was Dallas Langston. Maybe it wasn't him. But I went to a big workout there in the LA area, Orange County.
Yeah.
And all Eric Wolf was there, all these big names. And I remember, it was a big pool party. I remember being in there where I'm just having fun. I'm learning, right? So that's what I said to these guys, because I said to all these big names that are in the Southern California area, I said, I'm here to learn. You wouldn't believe the chuckles that I got from everybody. But it's true. Everything that I do, I'm in learning mode. I can arm wrestle a 130-pound girl and learn something. I can arm wrestle a 400-pound, not Levon.
I'm glad you made that clear.
Yeah. But I could learn from everybody that I sit up with. So when I sit up with you, my autistic mind and my hypersensitivity and awareness showed me certain things about you personally, right? Mm-hmm. Now, will I remember them if we ever arm wrestle? I have no idea, because I'm not there to bring that about. I'm here to, again, to be the person that I am. I read certain things. I don't have emotional feelings because of my my autism. Right. But at the same time, I can feel wind right here on the back of my ear right now, right? So because of this autistic thing that I have, I'm aware of things that people are not aware of.
Yeah, so like this.
We're in a competition. I'm listening. That was the whole point. I listened. So I listened to Don, and I used the stuff that he fed me, the knowledge he fed me, for the next day at the Ryan Sheets Memorial event. He didn't know that, but he knew it was in his head. He just didn't know how.
Right. Yeah, that's a good. And guys, at 10:21 mark, I clipped about 7 minutes ago. I had posted that that video and stuff in the chat. So feel free to go check it out, and then you'll understand what Alan's talking about, that whole story and stuff. So yeah, was that also the tournament where you?
I don't see the chat. Where do you see a chat?
Oh, it's well, for me, it's on the right-hand side. Like, if I do this, can you see this? If I put up Benji's comment, can you see that?
I see that, but there's no chat here at all.
Oh, why is it?
It could be me.
Might be you, because I can see it on my end, and like I can see when people comment. Like even Benji said, "Hey, Levon versus Fisher next, equal hands." Can you see that?
Yeah,
So but was that also the same tournament where you won and they had that big old, I don't know how tall that trophy was, and you took it and you went like this and it snapped? That's how big was that trophy?
6'7".
Yeah, that see, they don't make trophies like that no more.
Again, I have a very difficult time trying to control my adrenaline.
Right.
When I'm in a different frame of mind, I don't know what I'm doing sometimes. So I'll give you Cobra. Do you remember this time? If you're still on there, so Cobra and I show up at the Arnold's. We want the title, right?
Yeah.
And my adrenaline was so off the charts that when they called my name, I'm in the audience. They called my name. I go up to the 1, 2, 3 steps, right, to get on the stage, or 4. I can't remember that. I couldn't see him. I couldn't see the stairs at all.
Wow.
I grabbed onto the rail and tried to get up the best I could. I don't think anybody knew it in the audience. So I couldn't do anything about controlling my adrenaline at all. So when I got up there with Cobra, Cobra was there, but I don't remember.
Right. Well, I remember, was it at the Arnold, in Columbus, where they had it. So you had the stage, but then you also had what they call the pit. and everybody
Yeah.
hung out there. You have to go up the steps, because each table had a different weight class, and you go up there and stuff. You had to like bob and weave through everybody to get up on the stage when your name was called and stuff. So
Right.
yeah, I remember that setup. I remember.
And there have been many times in my career where I couldn't see straight. Many times. Some days, this might sound really strange to you, but sometimes my adrenaline takes over where I can't sleep 2 to 3 days before a tournament. And then after the tournament's over, I still can't sleep. Like I stayed up for 3 days after some world championships that I went to. 3 days I was up. I just couldn't. I try to sleep and I can't.
Wow.
Different form of autism, buddy.
Yeah. Mr. Peanut wants to know, how tall was the trophy after you broke it in half?
I don't know, maybe 4 feet. They had to repair it. They said the Sheets brothers, they said they would repair it and send it to me, which they kindly did repair it and send it to my home. I don't know whatever happened to it. I don't know. Most of my trophies, we gave Carol and I in the earlier days, probably mid 80s, between us, we had close to 400 trophies.
Oh, wow.
There's a picture of them somewhere on the internet in our backyard, and they take up the whole backyard. Carolyn said, and I've never been one to display them, and I'm not going to say, hey, sweetheart, clean my trophies.
Right.
So we gave them, we donated them to various places. The bank, there's actually pictures of the banks having many of those trophies inside too.
Right. Oh, wow. Well, I'll tell you what, Alan, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show and stuff. And I just want to say thank you very much. And can we do it again down the road?
Absolutely. And it was an honor for me to be part of your life here. It really was and is. And I wish you the very best. Check out armwrestlingtraining.com. That's a website that I built a long time ago. I'm not really doing arm wrestling training camps because there's no call for them, but I'm willing to do them. But I still have people come from various parts of the world to train one-on-one with me, which is exciting for me that I can give back. So thank you for taking the time to have me on here. It was an honor and humbling.
Yes, sir. Mr. Fisher, enjoy your weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
God bless, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care of yourself.
Take care.